And so I think this gets back to this importance of scientific empiricism, observation of facts, because what we have happen, it happens in society all the time. If someone observes something that doesn't conform with the paradigm, they are pilloried and they are thrown out of society. I'll give you an example. Right here at the University of Virginia some years ago, a brilliant doctor discovered that there was a type of bacterium that was responsible for a lot of the worst bleeding ulcers in stomachs. But because that ran against the medical paradigm of it all being cause of acid and this and that, he had to leave America and ended up in Australia. Now, if you don't test, if you have a patient with a bleeding ulcer and you don't test for this bacterium, because if it's there, it's easily treated with doxycycline. If you don't test for that, it's medical malpractice. But his life was ruined and his reputation was ruined because he dare speak the heresy of an observed fact that ran against scientific orthodoxy.
All of the things that are discounted because it's not fitting into the box of the current paradigm of science or religion or thought that gets chucked out. And that's where the good stuff is. That's the really good stuff. And often people who do begin to explore those things get persecuted. Like the University of Virginia, we have our farm out near University of Virginia, and there was a medical doctor who discovered that there was a bacteria, H. pylori, that causes a lot of the really bad bleeding ulcers. And it ran against the theory that it was just too much acid. And that if you took a course of this and that medicine instead of the acid medicine or with it, it would cure them without surgery or anything. He got run out of the country, ended up in Australia. Australia was the only place he could get a job. He ended up getting the Nobel Prize. But the initial reaction of the scientific fundamentalist paradigm, the high priests of science, were to say, no, it can't be because we know everything about how this works. Well, it turns out they didn't know anything about how ulcers work. So the same is true in physics, the same is true in materials, and the same is true in theological thought and consciousness studies. So I think that's why we have to sort of enter this whole subject with that kind of perspective. Then you can at least begin to explore with something resembling an open mind and learn something. And this happens in science all the time. We'll see something and we can describe the phenomenon and even the parameters of the science, but we won't understand really what it's doing. We still don't really understand how, from the herb foxglove, digitoxin works to increase contractile strength of the heart muscle. But it's been used for 100 years. And it wasn't until very recently they understood how aspirin worked, which was from the bark of a tree, is where you get aspirin from. They didn't understand how that really worked. And they still don't understand all of how it works, but you can use it and empirically see how it works. But the understanding unfolds over sometimes decades, centuries, millennia.